One of the things I wanted to highlight right at the front end here, in exploration, you need four things, in my opinion. You need financial capital, to do the exploration. It's the fuel for exploration for what we do. You need a project that has the merit, that has the goods on it in the first place. Sometimes it takes a while to find it, but they got to be there. And you need a strong technical team and a strong team overall. And obviously you need a little bit of luck. And I think if you have the team side down, it increases your luck. And I feel very fortunate to have such a great team, from my project manager, Brody Sutherland, Nathan Steeves here, Ian Cunningham Dunlop, or VPX, to all of the consultants that are involved from the, air transport to drilling. I think we're very fortunate. And I think in the current climate where there's been such an infusion of capital that's come into the space, not only are assay labs becoming a pinch point, but I think human resources are becoming a pinch point. It's as I say, I'm very happy and fortunate for the team that we do have. Also want to, at the front end here, highlight sort of our corporate ethos, the sense of responsibility that we take that goes throughout our company in terms of needing to both protect and benefit the regions where we operate. We want to leave a lasting positive legacy in the areas that we operate. So here's an outline of what we will be covering. I'm going to do the front end here, a bit of an introduction, some history and background on the property, with an extra focus on Alaska Native corporations. I think it's a really story that's not that well known. And then I'll hand it over to Nathan to run through the geology, the regional property and deposit geology. Also spend some time on the regional prospects. This is a property that hosts, a significant deposit, but there's a lot of opportunity, in our opinion, to find other deposits. And then conclude with a deposit model, or at least what we think is going on. It's definitely an evolving science. So for introduction, I thought there was no better way to introduce the property than present some of the drill results. It's certainly generated some boomers, 50, 70, 100 meter plus intersections of 10 to 20 grams gold. What makes it particularly unique, not just the width and the grade of gold, but the fact that you get the base metals with it. You can strip the gold away and you'd be ecstatic with these intersections. And it really, taking a life of its own here. Anyhow, we'll let Nathan talk about how and why we generate this, but it's a great starting point for us. We are located in south central Alaska, coastal Alaska, just off the shore of Cook Inlet. We're not very far from Anchorage and Homer and Kenai, so we got a lot of support in terms of workforce and supplies and that sort of thing close at hand. We are surrounded by a park. It is an in-holding within Lake Clark National Park, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Other features here, Cook Inlet, it's a fair amount of oil and gas drilling, primarily gas drilling within the Cook Inlet area. But we're not remote. It's a big factor for us. While we don't have road access now, from a future development standpoint, we're very happy with the location. And just speaking to that a little bit here, here's a barge with our drills, our first two drills coming to the project site in late June, early July of 2020. We truck our equipment to Homer and then put it on a barge and then barge right up to site and then skip it off with the helicopter into the property itself. Just a satellite view, aerial view of image draped on topography to give you a bit of a lay of the land. As I say, very close to Tidewater. You'd probably have to build about a 20K road to get from the coast to the deposit site, but it's relatively straightforward terrain for that sort of thing. You can see here where the camp sits, the main deposit, and the other main prospects highlighted here for reference. Zooming in on the property itself, just a photo, there was a camp that we inherited and an airstrip. It hadn't been occupied since the mid-90s, so we put some significant upgrades into it, but it's a pretty nice office for us, that's for sure. It's a great place to work, and you get a sense of some of the other outlying prospects. Lots of flat land in the foreground. The main deposit is just over this hill. It's kind of a day-site porphyry dome. It's just over the back side. The property, the deposit and the camp is on private land. It's Native Corp owned land, and it comes with road and port easement rights that were written into law through a federal act of Congress to permit the development and of mining on the project. So we acquired it through a mining lease with CIRI, which stands for Cook Inlet Region Inc. It's one of 12 regional native corps, land-based regional native corps in Alaska. Fairly conventional mining lease. It's got a 10-year exploration term, ultimately a development and production term. There is a back-in right whereby CIRI can earn up to 25% in the project. That's a one-time decision at the time of mine construction, which they would have to fund pro rata, and there are certain royalty rights as well. So here's a really brief history of Alaska native land claims. But I think the history in Alaska, particularly the Alaska native claims settlement side of things, it's a really unique story, and it's not a well-known story outside of Alaska. So I'm doing my best to kind of educate folks on it. But here's the short story. Alaska was bought from the Russians for $7.2 million in 1867. It only became a state in 1959. At that time, there was unsettled land claims for the indigenous peoples, but it was really the discovery of oil on the North Slope that was the catalyst to drive the settlement. To develop that oil, they needed to build a pipeline from the North Slope to the southern part of Alaska to Valdez, and that was really the catalyst for settling the land claims. And it's a very, very unique type of arrangement. What they did is they created it's a for-profit model with the land titles held by corporate entities, with the corporate entity shareholders being the indigenous people of Alaska. Lastly, they're specific to our region. There was some, it was imperfect selection initially, and it was kind of addressed in 1976 at the Cook Inlet Land Exchange. We're just talking a little more about this. So what they did is they divided the Alaska into 12 different regions, really defined by common heritage and sort of shared interests of the indigenous peoples within each of those areas. And then each of those regions had a regional corporation that was able to select lands within that region. Primarily, they were selected for their resource potential, whether that was oil and gas, timber, mining, or other. And one of the other neat aspects is that there's a sharing provision whereby the mineral wealth generated on projects on one native corp's lands is shared amongst all the other native corps on a sort of a 70-30 basis. And then that money is then further shared down to village corporations. So really, the indigenous people throughout Alaska all benefit through the development of the natural resources, and the indigenous people are in control of the development of their natural resources. And the best known example, I think, out there is the Red Dog mine with NANA is the native corporation there. NANA's received over $2 billion to date from the development of that mine. And those that don't know Red Dog, it's one of the world's biggest and best zinc mines. It really is a beautiful deposit. And over 1.4 billion of that money has been redistributed to other Alaska Native corps. It's quite cool, and very high numbers of shareholder hire, NANA shareholder hire, and the integration of subsistence cultural values into the operation. Great model. So moving on to the history of the project itself, the land, there was work done to assess the mineral potential of the region. That was sort of reconnaissance, silt sampling programs, that sort of thing. And that is what led to CIRI selecting the lands in 1979. They were conveyed to them. Shortly thereafter, the property was leased to Anaconda. They were a very big copper mining company at the time. They made the discovery in 1982. We're proceeding along very well, growing the deposit, but ultimately they got out of the mining space altogether. Globally, they pulled out. So the project then transferred to private hands for a short while before Westman Resources picked up the property. And Westman were a mid-tier operator that had mines on the west coast of North America. And they were specifically looking at developing this to support their current operation at the Premier Mill, which was under capacity. That's near Stewart, British Columbia. It's about 900 nautical miles away. And what they're going to do is they're going to direct ship the ore for processing there. It didn't quite pencil out. You can see in the backdrop here is the price of gold from 1974 till now. Gold prices were much lower then. It was more or less a break-even proposition. They shut down Premier. This reverted back to CIRI, and it sat there. It sat there for 25 years without a speck of work done on it, and really for no good reason. It just kind of got forgotten. CIRI was doing very well with their other businesses, and then eventually they approached us. It was through Constantine at the time, and we jumped at it. And so we've had about a year and a half now of work on the property, and I'll run you quickly through that before moving on to really the geological description side of the talk here. So quickly, our plan. So when we formed, we signed the lease, we created HighGold really to explore this property. And we gave ourselves sort of 2 or 3 year time frame to grow this project. In our view, what had been defined was the ideal mineral deposit at both width and it has grade. It would be a small footprint, underground type of operation with Alaska Native interests, so something that would be more attractive from a permittability standpoint and should have attractive economics when you've got grade and width and relatively small CapEx type project. Our focus is squarely on growing what we have, expanding the existing resource and making new discoveries. And it very well may be economic right now. We don't know. Prices have gone high, but we're not looking at that until we add a little bit more. We'll certainly take a chance at seeing what else is out there. And in our view, it was left underexplored because the past workers were really focused on the engineering. Certainly when Westman was there. So anyhow, what we did when we got live in 2019, we got a small drill program in the fall of 2019 that was really confirming and understanding the deposit that we had to put us in a position to generate a mineral resource. Here's a cross section through it. So great continuity of big thick intersections of mineralization here. With that, we were able to generate our maiden resource. We did this at a 4 gram per ton gold equivalent cutoff, and combined indicated and inferred, there's about 2.7 million tons. And just under 900,000 ounces gold equivalent. About 70-80% of that's in the indicated category, and it has a grade of about 10.9 grams per ton gold equivalent, with about 55% or so being gold, and the remainder of the value divided up between copper, zinc, lead, and silver. This is most definitely a polymetallic deposit. It is a gold-dominant deposit, but it is polymetallic. We are comfortable using a gold equivalent because we have decent metallurgy. We haven't done any ourselves, but it was done back when Westman and Anaconda were working here. They did various flotation tests. And in short, it's conventional flow sheet. You produce a copper con and a zinc con. It's coarse grained. There's no toxic or very low deleterious element concentrations, and fundamentally high recoveries. So this is our starting point. Not only did that allow us to kind of say what we had in terms of a starting point, in terms of mineral endowment, it was equally important from being able to communicate what we thought was extra special about this project, and that is its sort of width and grade, just the way the deposit behaves. It's got kind of the size in terms of the width of a bulk tonnage system, but we've got the grade of what's normally associated with a narrow vein type system. It's steep dipping, so it's amenable to long hole mining. It's good ground conditions. There is a lot to like about how this deposit looks. The big question is, how can we grow it? Keeping with the theme of mineability, one other attractive feature is due to the terrain in the area, when Westman was looking at developing it, they were looking at putting an adit at the valley floor and drifting in about 900 meters to a kilometer into the base of the deposit. Then you can mine your way up, so that's low upfront capital to get into the deposit. You'd actually mine the highest grade part of the deposit first, and gravity would be your friend. So looking at sort of what have we done then? So that's what we defined, came out of 2019 and said in May of 2020 or April or May of 2020, we came up with our resource. And now our emphasis was on growing it. So shown here is a long section. The black pierce points are the ones that went into the resource, with the dotted black line there being the actual constraints to that resource. The red dots here are the pierce points from drilling done this year. Green are ones that are still pending. I can't believe we're in mid-February and still waiting on assays, but we are. Anyhow, the big takeaways from the program was we were able to significantly expand the footprint of the deposit. One of the conventions, that was carried forward from the past workers was that this deposit didn't have any legs at depth or along strike. It was largely cut off at depth due to a fault. There is faulting. It is an important part of the story still, but clearly there is a very significant part of this deposit that is open to expansion down plunge. We think we've got a bead on what the plunge of the orientation of this deposit is in this direction, and it will be a big focus for us in 2021 to continue expanding the deposit. In addition to that, we also made the discovery of a sort of separate zone. It's related, and Nathan will talk more about that, but it's a copper-silver zone that sits in the stratigraphic footwall, basically out of the page at us. And the whole deposit now has been turned up on end. But it's important for two reasons. One, it will, we're pretty confident will add to the resource, but two, it tells us something about the geologic model and the formation of the deposit. And with that, I think I will hand it over to Nathan.
Right on. Thanks, Darwin. Good introduction there. So I'm going to step back out for a sec now, and we'll start with the regional outlook here, the regional setting for the deposit. Zoom into the property and deposit scale. And then I want to just take some time to share with you what the deposit looks like and what the host rocks look like. This deposit hasn't really been looked at in over 25 years, has not had a modern exploration program applied to it until now. And I'm pretty excited about this deposit. I think it's pretty unique, and the genetic model has always been kind of a big question mark. VMS, epithermal, what is it? So we're diving into that, and you can kind of keep that in mind through the presentation here. So stepping back out, this is south central Alaska. We're in the peninsular terrain. The Johnson Tract properties within the Talkeetna Formation, which you can see in gold here. I'll just turn my layer on. So in gold here as a rough outline of the Talkeetna Formation within the Talkeetna Arc. This was an interoceanic volcanic arc that was active from about 183 to 164 MA, at least within the Alaska Peninsula down here. And we'll zoom in to the Johnson Tract area here, but first I just want to point out this major structural break, the Bruin Bay Fault, which comes through the Talkeetna Formation here and actually bounds our property on the west side. So here's the Talkeetna Formation in kind of medium gray here. These are volcanic rocks, dacites and andesites primarily, and they're overlying these volcanic rocks is a big package of sedimentary rocks. These are middle to late Jurassic sedimentary rocks. The Talkeetna Formation is kind of thought to be early to middle Jurassic. It hosts all of the prospects on our property. And then to the west are the Alaska Aleutian batholith. This is the early Jurassic arc roots, granitoids. And then, of course, the volcanics would be the products of those roots. And so we've actually got the roots of the arc juxtaposed against the products of the arc by this Bruin Bay Fault, this big thrust fault here. And so you can see that on the cross section down here is the Talkeetna host rocks. These host the JT deposit and are actually, the stratigraphy here is drag folded as you get closer to the Bruin Bay Fault, so that stratigraphy is on end and locally overturned where it hosts the JT deposit here. looking at the property geology, there's a lot going on this map, and it is a bit outdated, but the important takeaway here is we've got this purple unit hosting a lot of the mineral prospects. These stars are all mineral prospects. This is a dacitic tuff unit, as well as dacite flows locally. These host the JT deposit as well as others. And then in green, we have andesites. These host several other prospects. Importantly, the Difficult Creek prospects, I'll talk a little bit more about later on in the presentation. And then I also just want to highlight this blue unit here. These are later quartz-spheric dacitic intrusions, sills, dikes, and perhaps domes, and locally some flows as well. And then again to the west, across the Bruin Bay Fault, we have the Alaska Aleutian batholith here around the deposit, mostly diorite and quartz monzonites, juxtaposed by the Bruin Bay Fault. So we'll just have a look at a property cross-section here. So again, we can basically separate the stratigraphy into 4 main units. We've got a lower andesite down here in green. This purple unit again is dacitic tuffs and locally flows. That unit hosts the JT deposit again, which is turned on end closer to the Bruin Bay Fault, as well as some other prospects. These upper andesites in green host mineralization as well, especially the Difficult Creek prospect I'll talk about later. And then we've got some quartz-spheric dacite flows above those. These are also occur similarly as intrusions through the units below. So that's about a 5-kilometer cross-section we're looking at there across the property. So we'll take a look now at the JT deposit here. This is what it looks like on surface. This is the Discovery outcrop. We've got about 150 meters actually outcropping. This is mostly, or basically just siliceous vein and breccia with high-grade gold and zinc on surface, as well as barite and jasper. It's a bit of a mess, and it's juxtaposed, or it abuts against the dacite fault here, which can be seen in this depression. And on the other side of that dacite fault is a relatively unaltered, barren quartz-spheric dacite intrusion. You can also see all the alteration in the tuffs in the valley around it. And then I also want to highlight up valley. You can see this better on the photo on the right. Up valley and down in the middle of the valley here is a big landslide. So that's covering up a lot of the geology in the valley here and kind of complicates exploration. A lot of the historic drilling was lost in that landslide. So we'll go now through a bit of a stratigraphic section here. I'll focus mostly on the host rocks to the JT deposit, and highlighted by this gold box here. So the lowermost unit, we have, again, these green, in green we have these andesites. These are mostly lithic tuffs and lithic breccias, dominantly andesitic composition, polymict. There's one marker horizon, this one seen here on the bottom, we call the terrazzo breccia, named after the Italian building stone. Quite a distinct unit, quite pretty. Above that, we've got a quartz-spheric dacite tuff. This is conglomerate sandstones and locally pumice breccias, but distinguished by these large quartz grains and up to quartz cobbles. These quartz clasts are locally euhedral quartzite and may have come from a quartz porphyry down below. I won't go too much into that right now. Above that, we've got another marker horizon we call the dark fine-grained tuff down at the bottom here. This is a dark gray to black mudstone, siltstone. Locally, it's fossiliferous, indicating submarine deposition. We're in the process of having these fossils examined, and early indications suggest that they are possibly inner shelf or inner to middle shelf. So 100 to 200 meter sea level. Could have been redeposited, but it seems like perhaps a good indication of very shallow marine conditions when this unit formed. And then in purple here, this big package of dacite tuffs, which host the deposit. These are primarily pumice-rich and crystal-rich tuffs. And you can see here, this is an image of a tuff that's starting to get a bit altered sericitic pumice class, and we're even starting to get anhydrite nodules, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. And within this section, we also see a fine grain interval that often contains worm tube burrows, another indication of submarine deposition. And then intruding the dacite tuffs and overlying units is a large quartz-spheric and feldspar-spheric dacite porphyry, as you can see here with little mafic xenos here and there. So that's kind of the general host, or those are the host rocks. Look at the alteration briefly. Basically, we've got an inner breccia vein zone that hosts gold and zinc with strongly silicified dacite tuffs. Outboard of that, we have lower grade but strongly silicious, a lower grade strongly silicious zone, and then that zones out to a very widespread anhydrite zone, and then again out to a very wide phyllic alteration zone, so just sericite pyrite plus or minus chloride and clay. And I want to talk a little bit about this anhydrite zone. It's quite unique to the deposit, or it's an important feature of the deposit anyways. It's not totally unique. You do see this style of alteration elsewhere, especially in VMS deposits. It's basically nodular anhydrite. These nodules can be up to a couple centimeters across, locally radiating crystals, and they're within a matrix of altered dacitic tuff in this case, which has gone mostly to either chlorite or sericite dominantly, plus or minus clay and pyrite. So this feature is seen in VMS deposits. Here's an example from Mount Windsor Volcanics, Queensland, another one from the Romero deposit, Dominican Republic, and these were pretty common features of the Kuroku VMS deposits in Japan. Seko ore, they called it, a massive nodular anhydrite gypsum. So the thought, or the thinking for or how this forms, and the Kuroku deposits anyways, is mixing of hydrothermal fluids with seawater. So we've got evidence of submarine deposition of the host rocks, as well as evidence of submarine conditions during hydrothermal activity, is what that's suggesting. So here's a cross-section of the deposit. This is kind of what it looks like. Darwin showed a bit of this before. The deposit itself, this silicious body, is hosted within this permeable dacitic tuff horizon. It can be up to about 200 meters thick in places. Again, it's steeply dipping to overturned. And in black, this little thin horizon is that dark fine-grained tuff marker horizon. And below that, we have our quartz-spheric dacite tuffs in white. And then a major structural feature here is this dacite fault. The mineralization is juxtaposed by this fault against basically barren, unaltered quartz porphyry in dark gray here on the right. So, so there's potential that mineralization has been cut off by that fault. So we'll have a look now at the deposit. The deposit is a polymetallic multi-phase sulfide or quartz sulfide vein and breccia body, quartz dominant veins for the most part, but with some massive sulfide veining as well. We also get chloride anhydrite, iron carbonate, jasper veins. And then I'll talk briefly about this footwall copper silver zone, this new discovery that we made last year. And that's in orange here, lower down, and hosted dominantly by these lower quartzite dacite tuffs. So I won't, we haven't really broken out all the vein paragenesis yet, work in progress, but I just wanted to walk you through some of the vein textures we're seeing because I think they're spectacular. So top left here, we see pyrite sphalerite, a lot of coliform textures along with jasper, a bit of a breccia cutting silicious altered tuffs. On the top right, here's a large quartz vein with pyrite, chalcopyrite margins. And VG might be hard for you to see, but this darker orange these blebs here are VG within kind of a chalcedony rim to this vein. And this one also shows possible ghost bladed texture, it seems, within the vein, so maybe some boiling evidence there. Here's a sphalerite and hydrate vein, bottom left, very coarse grain. You can see, do locally get some very fine grain coliform banding with sphalerite and galena, but not a super common texture. Top left, another quartz chalcopyrite pyrite vein. This one running about 28 grams gold, no VG present, so the gold's hiding somewhere in there. On the right, we've got a veined breccia here, so a class of vein surrounded by later veins. And then this bottom photo, I just wanted to show you kind of the coarse grain nature of our mineralization here. So these sphalerite grains are up to about a centimeter in size locally, and obviously growing inwards towards the center of the vein here. So some pretty spectacular core. Kind of near the edges, we are getting iron carbonate, kind of later iron carbonate and iron in that hydrate veining, and then also barite and jasper veining as well. And here's just another one of these multi-phase veins. This one ran almost 81 grams gold and 6% zinc. So here's the zinc, this pale honey brown here, quartz, and then with an anhydrite core to this one, and sorry, jasper as well. So I thought it'd be interesting to basically just walk you through a bit of a virtual core shack here to give you a sense. Those are some close-ups of the textures, but just give you a sense of what the deposit looks like in core. So we're going to look at this hole, hole 92, which was a spectacular hole we drilled early in 2020. And I know this is a lot to look at, but just wanted to highlight the grades here. So this is all the assays through that intersection over 2 slides. The gold equivalent on the right side here is showing, pretty consistently over 10 grams gold equivalent throughout the entire interval. And on the left, we see gold. Anything over 1 gram gold is yellow, so you can see pretty consistently over 1 gram gold. We do have internal zonations, so we've got some zinc-rich zones here, and then some gold-rich zones. And gold-rich to us, we're talking about over 25 grams gold. So pretty spectacular, but not to dismiss the rest of the lower grade intervals here. So we'll actually have a look at the core through one of these zinc-rich zones, and then also some of one of these gold-rich zones as well. And near the end of this, another gold-rich zone here. We're looking at almost 180 grams gold in some of these samples. So pretty spectacular. And this whole interval ran 74 meters of 23 grams gold equivalent with on average of 17.9 grams.
Did you see any VG in any of that?
No VG in any of that actually. So. We do think the gold is mostly occurring as free gold, just from downhole geochemical plots, but we definitely need to do more thin section work to kind of prove that out. So here's the dacite fault. That's that fault that's juxtaposing the ore deposit against the barren intrusive. You can see pretty obviously that we come through the fault. You're getting little sniffs, 0.4 grams gold equivalent, but basically unmineralized fault. And then right into massive sphalerite mineralization. So, these basically I've just shown kind of the highlights of for each one of these samples we broke out. So the first one there, 16% zinc, 45% zinc, 45% zinc. Pretty consistent grade, pretty spectacular looking core. Here's, we've gone down about 30 meters now. We're looking at this high-grade gold zone, so 28 grams gold, 30, 54, 22, 46 grams gold, in a strongly siliceous breccia, or tough breccia, and then cut by quartz-dominant quartz sulfide veins, which are likely bringing the gold in. The core is really competent, easy to mine. It's just a great deposit, great-looking deposit. And then here's some of those spectacular, very gold-rich samples, 180 grams there, 122 grams here. So as you can tell, kind of hard to tell what the grades are going to be when you first look at the deposit, so we really got to wait on assays unless we can identify VG. So we'll talk a little bit now about this footwall copper zone that we intersected last year and expanded, or intersected in 2019 and expanded in 2020. It's quite geochemically distinct and visually distinct as well, and it's hosted within this lower stratigraphic horizon. So we definitely think it's a different zone. And on the right here, this is a bit of a complicated section, but it's showing all these cylinders are showing copper composites, so anything over 0.5% copper. So these are kind of the higher grade copper intervals. And then they're color-coded by silver over gold ratios. So what this is showing is that within the resource domain, we're mostly seeing pretty subdued silver grades versus gold. And then within this footwall copper zone, we're seeing a lot higher silver compared to gold. So really copper silver rich down here, and you can kind of see the strata-bound nature of it showing up here as well, and we're seeing that folding as as the horizon's getting drag folded up on end by the Bruin Bay Fault. So definitely a lot of work to expand this zone as it was a new discovery. Here's kind of what it looks like: really coarse grain chalcopyrite, quartz, locally jasper. All right, so we'll take a step back now out to the property scale target. So that was the deposit, and now I want to talk a little bit about some of the other exciting prospects on the property. In particular, I'll review this map we just released last week with some of our results from the Difficult Creek prospect. So I know there's a lot going on this map, but I'll walk you through it. Basically on the bottom left, we've got the JT deposit, and we're looking at gold and silver soil anomalies. So we see a pretty high gold in soil anomaly right over the deposit. So that's over 100 ppb gold in soil as dark red. And then the triangles surrounding that are the silver grades from rock grab and chip samples. And as you can see, JT deposit is really strong anomaly right over the outcropping prospect, but overall a fairly subdued geochemical signature on the surface. We also have the Kona prospect to the north, and then further north we have Easy Creek. Those are two priority prospects. However, we're still waiting on results from those. But I'll talk a little bit about the DC Difficult Creek prospect. So here is Difficult Creek down on the valley floor here, in case you're having troubles getting your eye into the hillshade. And then as if we go up slope to the south here, kind of halfway up slope, we see what we call as Middle Difficult Creek. We're seeing a very strong gold and soil anomaly here, outlined by those red blobs. And then if we continue to go up, we see a very strong silver in soil anomaly above that. Now this gold and soil anomaly, this Middle Difficult Creek showing, has had a bit of historic work on it. There were a few short drill holes poked in, but not really a lot of follow-up work. And one of the, there is an outcropping vein breccia on surface, where, a 1.5 meter chip sample was showing 22 grams gold, 178 grams silver, 1% copper, and up to 20% lead. So pretty exciting prospect there with not a lot of work done on it. And it seems to be very much a gold-rich prospect. And as we move up, we're seeing a lot more silver in soils. And then right up on the ridge here, we've actually made a bit of a new vein field discovery from our fieldwork in 2020. And these are some of the results from grab samples from outcrop up on the ridge here. So really, we're only seeing outcrop up on the ridge. And, some of those samples are running up to 1,800 grams gold, 1,200 grams gold here. Silver. Pretty spectacular silver grades. We're very excited about it. And this is about 4 kilometers northeast of the JT deposit. So we'll kind of zoom in now to that ridge top. And so here is that ridge top. You can see spectacular alteration, and all along the ridge here is that new vein field discovery. And in the foreground and in the background, where that really strong kind of white clay alteration is, that's the Middle Difficult, more gold rich showing. On the last slide, we do actually see a bit of copper as well down in the valley floor. New discovery as well there with almost 10% copper from a grab sample. So we're seeing a bit of a zonation up in elevation as well as up in stratigraphy, from kind of a copper down deep to gold in the middle, and then to silver up higher up. So here's what that ridge top looks like. In the white dashed lines are all the outcrops. So as you can see, just about everywhere we've got outcrop, we've got veins mapped in, and almost every one of those outcrops has a grab sample that's running, over 100 grams silver. So really spectacular, exciting new discovery, and these are really showing kind of epithermal style textures, these veins. And importantly, I want to show how much overburden there is in this image too. Everything below the ridge here is all talus and overburden, so it could be hiding something big down there. We think this is right now a drill-ready target, and we're pretty hopeful that there's something big lurking down below as well. Here's just a couple shots of what those veins look like. We're looking at up to 1 meter or 2 widths, kind of 30 centimeter to 2 meter widths. Some pretty typical epithermal breccia textures and crustiform veins. We're seeing amethyst on surface, and some of these can be quite continuous, as you can see on the right here. So again, those epithermal style veins are hosted within this upper andesite unit here, around the Difficult Creek showings. And what we think is there's definitely potential with those veins and at depth, and possibly even down, if we start targeting down at depth to this dacite tuff in purple, that's the unit that hosts the JT deposit, that we could find something possibly akin to the JT deposit over there as well. All right, so that was kind of the deposit, and one of the prospects we're really excited about on the property scale. And I'm going to get a little arm wavy now near the end to try to maybe shed some light on what we think this thing could be. I like this figure from Dubé. He's kind of taken similar to, you've all got Silito's porphyry arc terrain figure in your heads. So this is kind of arc-related gold deposits, and Dubé's thrown in the VMS model here as well, just to kind of show, the VMS model does fit in here when you've got marine conditions. We've got our low sulfidation vein style. What is JT deposit? Is it intermediate sulfidation? Is it VMS? Still kind of being debated. I think it's got flavors of both. With that anhydrite alteration, you've definitely got submarine conditions. So, but we've also got pretty clear epithermal textures outcropping on surface as well. I think important to remember that anhydrite is really showing us we've got hydrothermal activity and seawater present at the same time, and we've also got submarine deposition of the host rocks. So we definitely have submarine conditions. Possibly, if those fossils are any indication, we're kind of dealing with 100, 200 meter seawater depth, so pretty shallow marine for a VMS. And I really like this figure I stole from Bruce Gemmel's presentation, I believe, based on Hannington's work. And kind of the classic Buchanan model for epithermal deposits put right next to the VMS model. And really the difference here is seawater. These shallow marine VMS deposits, pretty low temperature, often precious metal rich, with a lot of barite and silica sinter, massive sulfides. We haven't seen massive sulfide, like, classically stratified massive sulfides yet at the deposit, but so I think we're probably somewhere between these two models here. Structurally controlled deposition at depth, but with a seawater component to it. So here's kind of a hokey little arm waving model based loosely on Hedenquist's epithermal model here. It really seems like we've got a bit of a blowout within a permeable horizon, and maybe a stockwork vein zone within that horizon. Very siliceous alteration. Copper feeder zone up into it, in this case copper silver rich, surrounded by anhydrite alteration going out to phyllic alteration, and then possibly epithermal, and still keeping our eyes open for VMS. I think if we just briefly go back to that arc terrain model, or the arc related gold deposit type model, important to keep our mind open here for any deposit type, basically. So, we're not confining ourselves to one exploration model. We're even keeping our eyes open for porphyry. So on the right here, this cross section, again, showing kind of our stratigraphy, and then overprinting the alteration on that. I think this is, evidence for kind of our model here. This is kind of what we're dealing with. So just before the end here, just touch briefly on comparables. There's not a lot of comparables out there when it comes to what this thing is, but one of the ones we think is intriguing is the Hot Modern deposit in Turkey. You can see here, locally very similar vein textures. And we've got a little table here just walking through some of the key points for similarities there. These are both submarine, volcanic, dacite, andesite hosted deposits. both polymetallic, hod maden a little more copper gold, us a little more copper zinc, or sorry, gold zinc. However, we are finding that copper-rich footwall zone, so that expansion of that might lead us down this path. Both similar, polymetallic, multi-phase veins, quartz sulfide vein styles, jasper anhydrite, very similar shape and size. Hod maden's 3 times the size of us, obviously, 9 million tons, but similar cutoff or similar grades. And importantly, ours is not drilled off, so we're hoping to kind of get to this stage, obviously. And then what's next? We're a pretty science-focused company. We've got a really good technical team here, and we're pretty driven to do this right. This deposit hasn't had a modern exploration hasn't had modern exploration techniques run on it, obviously. Hasn't been looked at in 25, 30 years. So we're basically, our end goal this winter and spring is to develop a 3D geologic model and really understand the JT deposit and its surrounding geology and alteration. And then obviously further all of our surface exploration or surface prospects at the same time and get those drill ready. That was our plan in 2020. Let's focus on increasing the JT deposit size and scale, but also build up these regional targets for drilling this summer. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do, and we're really excited. Some spectacular results already out, and yeah, we're stoked. We love this deposit, and we can't wait to find more. So there you go. Probably ran on a little long, sorry about that, but do we have any questions?
Great, thank you so much, Darwin and Nathan. That was a superb combination of kind of giving the technical overview of the deposit, but also some of the background and particularly the discussion on, how to foster mutually beneficial relationships with First Nations landowners. It was nice that was kind of front and center. So if you remember our protocol for questions, if you have a question for either of the speakers, just pop the word question into the chat, and then I will call on you and you can ask your question yourself. So while we're waiting for people to formulate their questions, maybe I can start with one. In the Buchanan model, there is this gold-rich zone that occurs in the more shallow environment, than the copper-rich zone. From just the drill hole results you showed for that one hole, there seems to be high-grade gold zones within one drill hole. Is there any idea of what's controlling that high grade on kind of the tens of meters of scale?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think to properly answer that, we really need to kind of do an internal deposit architecture and really break that out. But we are seeing a bit of a zonation from kind of copper down below to maybe more gold, zinc, and then we are getting to more zinc on the periphery. But, within that one drill hole, it's I'm not entirely sure what's really controlling that tight internal zonation yet, no.
And there's definitely multiple phases of veining. It's just none is diagnostic enough at this point to kind of really label it on one thing, which is frustrating. It would be nice to be able to look at it and kind of go dial in and know exactly what's controlling it. And it's really quite variable throughout the deposit. So while there's this broader zonation, internally we'll certainly, both laterally and vertically, we'll have zones that are much more base metal rich and much more gold rich, without sort of just it's not just one big even sort of zonation from in to out.
Yeah, I think it's what's interesting is this is clearly a structurally controlled deposit where we're getting, it's a long-lived multi-phase. We're getting a lot of overprinting vein structures, a lot of brecciation of vein structures. So quite complex and definitely needs kind of a thesis to break it up.
You can do your second PhD, Nathan.
Yeah, there you go.
No, he can't.
All right, I believe we have our first question from iPhone Van Fyke. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Yes, it's Fyke. Well, thank you. I just had a question. How far do you think you have discovered already? Because you have been drilling for a long time. But do you think you have discovered like 2/3 of it, or do you have any idea how much more drilling there's going to be?
Well, this is a great question. If I knew the answer, it's always a difficult answer to say. I think for us, we really feel like we're just getting going. We got one short program in 2019 that was really about getting to know the deposit itself, and now we've steadily progressed out. We're not seeing anything to suggest sort of a limitation on the system at depth. While some of the metal grades are variable, we get some areas that are more gold rich and some more base metal rich. One of the aspects we do see is that sort of copper footwall zone. We don't see that up high in the deposit. Remember, the whole thing's been turned on end. And so as we're going deeper, we're seeing it. And we think the axis of the deposit is we're tracing it down as we go down plunge. So we like the fact that we're seeing more copper as we go deeper. The optimist in me feels that's a good sign that we're going to keep finding more. There is a component of this fault structure. While there's certainly a tremendous amount of opportunity to extend the deposit sort of down plunge, there is some of it that's most certainly been offset. We don't know how much, and that it will be part of our targeting as well. So I don't know. In short, Hod Madden is our target, so we want to grow it by 3 times. So there's going to be a bunch more drilling to do. And when you realize historically here, we've already drilled half as much as what was drilled in the previous, in the entire history as was done. There's 27,000 meters of drilling done. We did 15,000 meters, last year, or 16,000. And with drilling, you expand things. And our focus, because we've got the cash to do it, we want to keep growing it. Does that answer your question?
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one other kind of point to make on that too is quite a bit of the drilling done in the 90s by Westman was pretty focused on, as Darwin mentioned, getting that to a mine stage. So a bit of geotechnical and kind of, infill drilling. And so, it's pretty early days overall on this deposit still. And there's a lot of areas we've identified for expansion. But yeah, it's hard to say exactly how much more there is.
Yeah. And from the corporate hat on my side, we see the best way to add value near term and build value for the company is in growing the resource. That's the most rapid way we can do it. We want to de-risk it at the same time with the other pieces of ultimately with engineering and more metallurgy and environmental work. But our primary focus, certainly for the next 12 to 18 months, is to grow the system.
Great. Okay, and we've got another question from Della. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, I probably have several questions just because I'm, a series shareholder. And I want to thank you guys for mentioning that in the beginning. But my question is, how concerned are you with the shareholders or the native land that you're working on? And you guys sold a whole bunch of shares of stock, and does that take away? I know you have to have money and resources to make money, but is that going to diminish from the native people? Is what I want to know.
Yeah, well, good question, and thank you so much for calling in. I think it's fantastic that you did sign in and listen to the presentation. And we take our relationship with CIRI and the CIRI shareholders, it's very important to us just to understand the structure of the agreement. So any issuance of shares won't dilute CIRI's interest in the project. It would only dilute existing HighGold shareholders' interest, because CIRI's interest is in the project, not in the company. So they have the ability to back in for 25% of the project. But equally importantly, right as we're working right now, we make lease payments that go to CIRI, and ultimately, if this goes to mine development, royalties would flow directly to CIRI and in turn to CIRI shareholders. So it's not impacted at all by our sort of corporate structure and capital structure.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, shoot.
Okay, so I know in other copper mines, or I live in Arizona. So, you know, around copper, there's turquoise and there's whatever else you guys see there. Are you guys going to just like throw that stuff away, put it in a pile somewhere, give it away, or, you know, you're going to be selling more than just gold, zinc, and copper?
Yeah, well, a project like this, if it were to get developed, and it's a big question mark still, there's not certainty that it will, but should it get developed, what you would envision is development of you break the minerals down to the ones that have the copper, create a copper concentrate, you create a zinc concentrate, and perhaps even a bulk concentrate or a lead concentrate, and you would sell all of that to the concentrate markets. As far as, you know, surface, you know, other sort of secondary copper minerals, we don't see a ton actually, but yeah, good question. You know, with the beauty of a polymetallic deposit, some guys are purists, they just want gold, but the beauty of a polymetallic deposit is it does give you lots of optionality in terms of different metal prices, and oftentimes can make a project more robust. It ultimately ends up with a slightly more complicated processing flow sheet, but in the end, we see it as being very attractive, particularly when you know the metallurgy is good, i.e. the ability to win the metal out of the rock.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for checking in.
Thanks, Della. Sorry, we have another question from Feike.
Yes, thank you. Actually, it's like a double question, because what I hear is that you have been drilling for a long time, and what you said in the presentation first is that you have like 10 years of drilling time and 5 years of mining time. Is that right? And I was wondering, when will you start building a mine to extract it?
Yeah.
How long do you have them?
Yeah, I guess time frame is different for everyone. For some, it seems like we've been drilling for a while. We feel like we're just getting started, you know, having only been at it for a year and a half. But yeah, the terms of the mineral lease with CIRI have a 10-year exploration phase by what you're trying to drive to an economic study of some sort, a PEA. And then the sort of development stage includes the higher level of engineering studies. It's a question I can't answer. It really is going to be dictated by metal prices, markets, and our results of development. But, you know, as a general rule, our approach was we thought we would need 2 or 3 years of drilling to establish somewhat larger scale to the system before doing the economic and the heavy economic and engineering studies. So, you know, that's typically, you know, so you'd be looking at kind of all goes well, a 5-year time plan maybe before deciding when it goes into production. But that's, you know, those are very difficult questions to answer, because you know, it's really dependent on the results that are generated.
So it's going to take another couple of years at least.
Yeah. Although, you know, if you have enough drill success, it becomes obvious. But it still takes you a couple of years to backfill all the engineering and everything. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. And we have a question from Debbie, and I am conscious of time. It is 1:10 p.m. in Vancouver, but we are having a good discussion, so we'll keep the questions going for a little while longer. Thanks to all who are staying online. So Debbie, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. One of my questions was just, and I typed it out, do you require more than one deposit to give you more confidence for the area being viable for economics in terms of development? And I guess in a way, and this might be too early to answer this, but could there be synergy between these deposits in terms of how you would develop them and go forward?
Yeah, again, a difficult question to ask. I mean, more is always better in terms of economics. We really like the prospectivity or potential of the greater property package, and we think there's pretty high odds of finding something else out there. We hope that we can find something else in a reasonable time frame. You know, one of the neat aspects about this property is when you actually, there's a lot of optionality to it. You know, historically, when Westman looked at this, they were looking at direct shipping to another mine site to process off-site. And that's, you know, that's usually not something you typically think of unless you're in a you know, a mining camp like say Timmins, where there's multiple different operating mills around you. But this, because marine transport is so low cost, it is a, you know, it's a reasonable scenario to look at. You know, there's talk in the past of developing a sort of a central processing facility near Ketchikan that would process the Niblack ore and other ore. There's properties like other properties within Alaska on the coast that produce concentrates that, you know, something like this might be a good fit for. So that deviated from your question a little bit, but I think you evaluate all options. It could be standalone as with just the one deposit where it is right now. If it's larger, it becomes more obvious. Finding a second or third deposit probably makes it that much more obvious. But it's, yeah, there's a lot of variables that go into it for sure.
Thanks for that. So I think we'll just take a couple more questions here. We've got one from Eric Coffin.
Hey, Darwin. I'm asking you this question probably a little bit early because you're in the middle of this, but do you have any sense of how much of the budget you're gonna apply to the DC area? I mean, it looks pretty interesting, but I realize you've got to continue to work on building up and increasing the deposit at JT and also obviously bringing it up into higher categories. But do you have a sense yet? Are you guys going to drag a couple more drills up there this year and just put them at DC? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, we're evaluating that right now. We would dearly like, we fully intend to be drilling there. We have 3 drills currently on site, so we have those locked in for sure for the summer's program, and we will be starting with those. Whether we add a 4th or 5th to go drill the other targets while we keep the 3 on the main deposit, or we stick with just 3. As you may know, drills are getting harder and harder to come by in the mining in the space. So we're very happy to at least have our 3, and we'll have a much longer field season this year than last year. So we can get, you know, last year we drilled 16,000 meters, and that's with adding a 3rd drill halfway through the season. So with the 3, we can do a lot of damage. It is going to figure prominently. We hope to also test some of the other prospect areas once we get the rest of the results back from some of those other showings prospects as well. And it was part of our mandate from the start, you know, spend last 2020 getting them to the drill stage and understand them with the geophysics and surface sampling. So yeah, not a specific answer, but it'll definitely be part of the program. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just add the note because I know you can't say it, but just for some of the people who have asked the question, that the resource expansion heavy drilling phase is really where the torque is for shareholders. And unless someone is essentially certifiable, they really don't want to run a mine in Alaska for 20 years. But Darwin can decide on his mental state when the time comes. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. We need a question for something really, really tough on the technical from Nathan here. I want him to prove himself.
He has gotten off absolutely scot-free. This is supposed to be like a PhD defense.
That was the last question, right?
Can you guys use geophysics on the epithermal, or is it basically there just isn't enough there that's gonna be able to be differentiated? Is there anything you think might work over there?
Yeah, we're looking at that. We did some, there's been some historic geophysics, some airborne and ground VMEG and EM. We don't have access to a bunch of that, but we did run our own ground IP survey over Difficult Creek last year, and actually somebody in the audience here is doing the inversion on those now, and we're hopeful that we'll get something out of that. Yeah, we're looking for.
Are you guys thinking? Have you tried CSAM? Or are you thinking of trying CSAMT over here? I mean,
we did
a lot of silica.
Look at it. Yep, we did look at it, and it's still kind of an option in the back of our heads.
Right.
We thought we'd try this DCIP first. But yeah, it's a possibility that MT in general could work.
And we are seriously. I'm not sure if Nathan mentioned it, but we are seriously considering doing a airborne MAG EM survey. I think you know. Airborne data and surveys have changed quite a lot in 30 years, and so there's some value to that. And we do think sort of almost like below these andesites, like the old data seems to map out a resistivity low, and we're not totally sure what that is or how real it is, but it's maybe like clay alteration, and it's maybe seeing below the andesites into that dacite. And so we really like that kind of idea that there's kind of a big plumbing system below what you're seeing in this image right here. And you know, and the EM, I mean, I still hold out the idea that there may be a bona fide VMS lurking in this as well. You know,
No one did.
you have a lot of pieces, you know.
V10's never
What was
been
that,
done
sorry?
here, right?
I still
Because-
think
I didn't catch that, sorry.
You guys have never done V10.
No,
one
no,
has
we've
done
No,
here,
that's right. Yeah.
But you don't actually see any massive yet, so I guess I can see why.
no, but there is the Double Glacier prospect at the very south, has like chert and what looks like exhalate of sphalerite, and we've seen some stuff in drill core where you could convince yourself, you know. So there's, you know, there's
Pyrite tube casts too mapped in places. There's definitely hints of VMS.
yeah, it's actually really
around,
quite
so-
cool. We didn't.
Right.
I don't think Nathan touched on it, but in the section through John Prophet's mapping, you know, they picked up high up in the section that's one horizon where they get these kind of pyritic tubes that are like, you know, I don't know, 10, 12 inches long. They're all kind of knocked over at a layer. So I don't know if that's leakage way high up in the section or what it's telling you, but cool looking all the same.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, I think we'll wrap up with one last question from Leanna. And if anybody else has questions, obviously you can email Nathan or Darwin, or you can email me and I can give you contact information. So Leanna, you've got the last question.
Well, they stole my geophysics question, so I was gonna wonder what the geophysics was telling you, but it seems like you haven't quite got through it yet. But if you could take a further look over near the DC section, what would you like to do next over there?
Drill.
Any favorite spots?
Right here and then the middle difficult showing down below the gold ridge showing for sure. I would probably set up right on this ridge here and just see what's down there, what's lurking.
Yeah, and at Middle Difficult Creek, so Nathan had alluded to, there was a little bit of historic drilling, just a handful of holes. One was like 36 meters of 3.5 grams gold with base metals that bottomed in gold. One of the soil anomalies we have is tied to that and the surface showing. We've got an entirely new golden soil anomaly that's about 300 plus meters in length that has no drill holes in it. And all of that, it looks like it's just a little window through the andesite as we're seeing down into it. So there's lots that we can kind of chase based on chemistry and geology right now. We will certainly add, once we get the inverted data back, add that geophysical layer to this. But I'll leave it with that.
It's a relatively unknown or under investigated area. You know, there's not really a lot of detailed mapping in this area. There, you know, it's quite wide open. So our next steps is to do some more mapping and sampling, but also, we'd love to throw a drill on it. And
Sounds like a lot of exciting exploration potential there. Have fun with that.
thank you. We will.
Great. On that very positive note, I think we'll wrap up today. A very, very big thank you to both of you, Nathan and Darwin, for a great presentation, and also for all the people that tuned in today. This was a special presentation where we had shareholders represented and members of CIRI, as well as our more conventional MEG membership. And I think that's really special about these virtual talks. So thank you again, and Nathan and Darwin hope to say thank you in person sometime soon, and hopefully the next time we meet will be in person in September. So stay tuned for an advertisement for our next talk, which should be held in March on LinkedIn, or just sign up to info@vancouvermeg.com. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll sign off now.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Great. Take care.